Good afternoon, West in the world. It is Thursday, February the 11th, and during this past week, we've focused in on two themes. The rise of absolute monarchy as the dominant system of government in Europe from the 17th into the 18th century, and also, in today's discussion, the scientific revolution and the transformations that it brought about. In one sense, these are two very different topics, and yet, at the same time, they do identify or help us see some common threads, one of which we have been discussing all along the way, which is the shifting position of religious authority and the place of religious leadership within the life of Europe as a whole. When it came to religion, last week we were talking about the Protestant Reformation and how this fragmentation happens. When we turn to absolute monarchs, we saw that what is happening there is a dramatic increase in the power of the state. And that among the powers that are most tightly controlled or most dearly coveted by these absolute monarchs is the ability to exercise control over religion. That someone like Louis XIV in France understands himself not to be just the complete embodiment of the state and the person who exercises unquestioned control over the matters of politics in his state, but also the person who is ultimately responsible for the religious life of that state, who is the head of its church and has the final authority in it. Much of this authority, of course, is derived from that notion of the divine right of kings. That because the king is now seen as God's divinely appointed representative, that he must be obeyed in every issue, even a matter of religion. This is, of course, not a new idea, and we sort of stressed that whether it was the Chinese mandate of heaven or the Ottoman Empire example of the caliphs like Suleiman the Magnificent, we've seen this pattern unfold a great deal. So the rise of absolutism and the sort of shift that it represents in growing state power is an important one. We talked in that context also about sort of the different trajectory of England as it moved from absolute monarchy to mixed monarchy by way of the Glorious Revolution of 1688. But then today we turn to the scientific revolution, another way in which the power and authority of the church as an institution is coming under fire. We talked about it in one of your homework assignments as part of one of the contributing factors to the destabilization of the sort of spiritual stability of Europe. And in that sense, we talked today especially about how that debate over geocentrism versus heliocentrism creates a strong negative reaction on the part of the church. And you want to make sure that as you prepare for next Thursday's exam that you can explain why it is that the church would feel so invested. Not only what were they teaching about these issues in terms of their support for the geocentric perspective, but also what it is about the wider context, the rise of absolute monarchs and the threat of Protestantism that makes the church unwilling to yield anything in this time period. And then we said that the scientific revolution transitions in the lives of people like Isaac Newton from being just about the discovery of the physical world to very much being about the uncovering of the laws that govern human relationships. And that's where we turn our attention next Tuesday, to the era of enlightenment and how people begin to sort of reinterpret their place in society. Talk a lot more about that next week. Have a good weekend. See you on Tuesday.